Today, we're diving into a really fascinating story. It's all about survival, a ton of ingenuity, and a very, very modern solution to an ancient problem. We're talking about honeybees, one of nature's most important workers, and the absolutely incredible lengths Canadian beekeepers go to protect them from one of the harshest climates on Earth. It turns out they've basically engineered a way for bees to just skip winter altogether. So let's just jump right into the big question. Think about it for a second. How on earth do you keep millions and millions of bees alive through a brutal Canadian winter? We're talking months of deep freeze temperatures, howling winds. It really seems like an impossible job. So how do you get these tiny, delicate colonies through something so extreme? Well, the answer is probably not what you're thinking. Okay, so before we get to the solution, you really have to understand the sheer scale of the problem they're facing. For a honeybee colony, winter isn't just a long nap, it's a life-or-death struggle. The old-school way of doing things was to wrap the hives in insulation and just hope for the best. You'd leave them out in the elements, and the bees would huddle together in a tight little ball, shivering their muscles to generate heat, and just slowly eat through the honey they'd spent all summer making. But man, what a gamble. A freak cold snap, not quite enough honey, or a colony that's just a little bit weak, and that's it. The whole hive could be gone by spring. It's a tough, brutal fight for survival. So, facing these kinds of devastating losses year after year, Canadian beekeepers came up with a pretty radical alternative. They decided that instead of fighting winter, they'd just take it out of the equation completely. Yep, you heard that right. They pack up literally tens of thousands of hives and move them all indoors for the winter. We're talking about these massive, dark, perfectly climate-controlled buildings. It's like a giant dormitory for bees. They're put into this deep, quiet state of rest where they use up very few resources, completely safe from the blizzards raging outside. It's a huge shift from just enduring nature to actively controlling it. Okay, so what do you get for all that work? Is it really worth it? Well, the payoff is absolutely massive. It doesn't just change survival rates, it pretty much transforms the entire business of beekeeping. Now, here's what's so amazing. The benefits just keep stacking up. Because the bees are in this cozy, stress-free environment, they eat way, way less honey. They don't just come out in the spring alive, they come out physically healthier, with higher levels of proteins and fats stored in their bodies. And what that means is you get these super strong colonies that just explode in population, ready to go for that critical spring pollination. For the beekeeper, it means they have a guaranteed supply of top quality bees. It is a total game changer. But you know how it is. There's no such thing as a free lunch. This level of control brings with it a whole new set of pretty demanding challenges. And here is the flip side. This is so much more than just stacking some boxes in a warehouse. The labor involved is intense. You have to select the right hives, prepare them, and then physically move thousands of them. And the buildings themselves, that's a huge upfront cost. Plus, you're creating a unique environment, which means unique problems. A disease, for example, can spread very differently indoors. And because the bees come out so big and strong in the spring, managing them is actually more work. So you're essentially trading the unpredictability of nature for the complexity of intense management. And this really boils it down to the core decision a beekeeper has to make. On the one hand, you get these incredibly robust, healthy colonies that are just raring to go in the spring. That's a massive, massive pro. But on the other hand, you've got to pour in a ton of labor and money to make it happen. It turns beekeeping from a seasonal job into this year-round, logistically heavy operation. It's a choice between agricultural precision and the risks of the wild. So let's say a beekeeper decides to take the plunge. What does it actually take to pull this off? This is where we get into the real science of keeping millions of bees happy in the dark. The entire system, literally everything, hinges on creating the absolute perfect state of dormancy for the bees. It's this incredibly delicate dance between four things: temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide, and ventilation. If you get even one of those wrong, you could be looking at a total catastrophe for every single bee in that building. And here it is. This is the magic number. All the research points to this sweet spot between 4 and 7 degrees Celsius, that's about 40 to 45 Fahrenheit. If it gets any warmer, the bees get too active and start burning through their winter food supply. Any colder, and they have to work overtime just to stay warm. This specific range keeps their metabolism at a nice, slow, steady burn, saving all that energy for when it really counts in the spring. And just as critical as the temperature is the air they breathe. I mean, think about it. You have thousands of colonies of living creatures all packed together. They're constantly breathing out moisture and CO2. Without some serious, constant ventilation, you'd get condensation dripping all over the hives, CO2 levels would go through the roof, and the heat from the bees themselves could actually cause the whole building to dangerously overheat. Yeah, even in the dead of winter.
This quote from the research really says it all. This isn't just another chore you do at the end of the season. It is a highly technical agricultural system. It takes meticulous planning, constant monitoring. It's a huge commitment. That's exactly why the experts always tell beekeepers who are new to this to start small. Learn the ropes before you bet the entire farm on it. So, is anybody actually doing this? Well, the numbers might actually surprise you. This isn't some weird niche experiment. In major honey-producing provinces like Manitoba and Quebec, this is now the main way it's done. More than half of all bee colonies get moved indoors for the winter. That's a massive shift in how beekeeping works.
So let that sink in for a second. That idyllic image we all have of a beehive sitting peacefully in a field covered in a light dusting of snow, well, for a huge portion of Canada's bees, that's just a thing of the past. The new reality is a carefully controlled, industrial, and ultimately a much safer hibernation. It's a stunning change in farming practice that's happened in just a couple of decades. And that really brings us to our final question for today. When we develop these incredibly complex ways to manage and protect a species as vital as the honeybee, it makes you wonder, are we moving away from a kind of partnership with nature and more towards a direct cultivation of it? This whole system shows that the line between raising animals and precision farming is getting blurrier all the time. What do you think that means for how we'll interact with the natural world in the future?